Surprised to see me? Remember that I'm not leaving until April 7th, so you'll have to stick with me for just a little while longer. But anyways, I'm here at the Earth Science Center of the Fireside Tales. And today's story is a bit controversial, because it hasn't occurred yet. It is something that's been told by the prophets of the Fireside Tales, who have never actually been wrong. But, yeah, it might sound unbelievable at times. It's something that hasn't happened yet. And a lot of you will say to yourself, well, it couldn't happen, or that it is a future that would be impossible. But I will remind you that back in the old days, people thought the same thing, that something like this could never happen, that it would be impossible. And the prophets predicted it, and it ended up being. So just keep an open mind. That is what I would recommend to you. And anyways, this story occurs in Babel. Lawrence was going to the house of a child whose name was Elliot. And as he went into the room, he met with the parents. And the parents began to brag about the child, telling Lawrence how intelligent he was and how well he was doing out in the sports field. And Lawrence would listen and nod his head. And finally he went into the room and he saw the boy. Now the boy was sitting there and he was drawing some pictures. A few of them were of dragons, a few of them were of rocket ships. And as Lawrence sat down, he put down the paper and pen and told the boy to go ahead and start filling out the questions. Well, anyways, he began to do as he was told, Elliot, being very quiet and very well behaved. And the clock ticked by. It sounded like the ticks were loud as bells changing. They seemed almost to be alive. And that room with Elliot and Lawrence seemed to be the entire universe at that point. But anyways, when Elliot was finished, he handed over the paper to Lawrence, and Lawrence took it and said thank you. And as he was turning to go, Elliot said, Mister, did I do well? And Lawrence turned around. I don't know, Elliot. You know, you've spent a lot of time drawing and playing around. You have to remember, this is all very important, what you're being tested on. Oh, yes, sir, I know that, said Elliot. And I do try, I really do. It's just that sometimes I find my mind going to places where I just don't understand why they go. I really can't help it. You can understand that, can't you? That I can't help it? Maybe Mr. Stephen Coleridge, maybe he could make an exception. He could see that I have something, really, of value for the whole world. And, Lawrence looked at him. Perhaps, child. Perhaps. He left the house, and as he was going down the street, he thought to himself about the boy. He felt something for him, something in the boy's eyes. It felt like he was reminded of something. And he couldn't get the boy out of his head as he went up into the office and went to begin his work. As he was sitting there, another man came over. This man's name was Wilkes, and as Wilkes came up, he said, We've got a new batch of kids here, and he put down the papers. And as Lawrence was filling them out, he looked up to see Stephen Coleridge standing there, looking down at him. Now, I suppose I should explain to you who Stephen Coleridge was. Well, he was the dictator of this society. I wouldn't necessarily call him a dictator. He was voted in and everything. But he ruled the place with an iron fist. Now, he, like his predecessors, believed in the Constitution, which stated that if a person wasn't intelligent enough or wasn't physical enough, they were to be killed. This had been a tradition that had been passed on from generation to generation. It was also necessary because the population was at its worst, and many people were starving in the streets. Only the best could survive, was the idea, in order to reach a new world. That new world was believed to be actually Mars, as absurd as it might sound to you all listening today. where they hoped to be able to create life, and were currently working on it, although the process had turned out to be much more difficult than they had imagined. But Lawrence was looking at Stephen. Lawrence was looking at Stephen, and he said, "Something the matter, sir?" "Nothing," said Stephen. "It's just that, well, my friend, you seem to not be doing as well as you used to be. I've noticed that you're forgetting your pin sometimes, and your coat." "Oh, yes, sir, I am sorry about that," said, Lawrence. It's been kind of a hectic schedule is all. We have the new people to take care of." Anyway, Stephen, he nodded his head. "It's not just that. Those, throwaway files, those throwaway papers, you put them in the trash. Now, they're supposed to go into this incinerator bin." And Lawrence said, "Well, sir, it doesn't really matter. I mean, they get destroyed either way, and it doesn't really affect the business." "Yes, but they're supposed to go in the incinerator," said Stephen. "We have done that for years, and you have done it for years. And, well, everything has to go in its proper place." "That reminds me of the paper clips," said Stephen. "You see, you've been throwing them away when they are supposed to be recycled. Again, everything in their place, Lawrence." "I'm sorry, sir," said Lawrence. "Again, they're just paper clips. They mean very little. They cost very little for our business." "Well," said Stephen, "you know the test is coming for you, too, here very soon. And I am the last person alive who wants to kill anyone. But it may come to it that you die if you are not able to pass this test. I worry. You might be getting a little older and forgetting things, but that is no excuse. My friend, I was willing to kill my own son for this world. And I certainly am willing to kill you. You need to step it up." And Lawrence said, "Sir, I don't know if I can keep living in this world. I'm sorry, I don't know if I can keep living in it." Now, I should here mention that Stephen was much more different of a person than most. He was very much into his society, very much obsessed with it, but he had this strange habit of enjoying alternate arguments, in fact, preferring people that gave him alternate arguments. If more of the society had realized this, perhaps more of them would have been willing to argue with him. But Stephen only smiled when Lawrence said that he wasn't sure if he could live in this world, and he patted him on the back. "My friend, this place, the city of Ember, city of Babel, it is what has to be. Believe me, I do not want to kill people. I take no joy in it. But we need to survive. There's too many people, and we have to get rid of them somehow. We tried getting rid of them by a random selection, but then we lost some of our greatest men. So we thought, well, if people earn their right to this world, they can have it. It makes perfect sense. And besides, it's the only way. The truth is, someone has to die. I don't like it any more than anyone else. And the moment that I don't have to do it, the moment someone comes up with another way, I'm willing to try it. But for now, this is all we have." Lawrence nodded his head. "I know, sir. I'll try. I'll be different." "All right," said Stephen. And he left. The rest of the night was spent with Lawrence, busily listening to the news. His wife came in, and she seemed to be worried about him too. He seemed to be forgetting quite a lot more. And yet as he sat there, Lawrence wasn't in the mood for study, as he had done his entire life. Instead, he was thinking to himself. He was thinking about that boy again. He just couldn't get him out of his mind. Something about the boy's eyes. They seemed so bright, so otherworldly, like something almost that he had forgotten. And as he sat there listening to the news, as the districts got back their tests, and each district was told who was going to live and who was going to die, Lawrence found himself not particularly caring, just wanting to see that boy again. Well, anyways, the next day he got up and he went back to work. And as he was going by, he saw buses going, and they were filled with people that were not very intelligent and were looking out, some of them even mentally challenged. There was a rule in the city that a person could reach a certain age before they had to take the test. But anyways, as Lawrence went up to his office and was sitting there, Wilkes came by, and he sat down. "Stephen, I have some bad news for you. I looked at the results. Your name was on them." Lawrence, he turned. You're kidding? It's not possible. I've served this city my whole life." "I'm sorry," said Wilk. "I know that I'm not supposed to tell you this, but I couldn't. You've been my best friend for all these years. Good luck to you. You get your affairs in order and, well, do what you have to." And Wilkes, he got up and left. Wilkes himself never did understand why it was that he told Lawrence this. I guess it was some kind of mercy in his mind, maybe a bit of pity. But as Lawrence sat there, he knew what he was going to do. He was going to go by that boy's place. So he took one of the company's own cars, something that he wasn't really supposed to do, and began to drive. He drove down to the house, and he knocked on the door, and the parents answered. And Lawrence said, "Your boy's going to die." The parents looked at him for a moment, and Lawrence said, "Go get him, right now." And anyways, the parents, they ran off, and they grabbed hold of the child, and they took him down. And Elliot walked up. Elliot was given some food and some water, and as he looked at Lawrence, he said, "What's going on? Why are you doing this, mister?" "Indeed," said the parents, "why are you doing this?" And Lawrence said, "I don't know, but if you want your son to live, he's got to come with me." Anyways, the parents looked at each other for a moment, and they seemed to be thinking about to themselves. Maybe they were thinking about the laws that they had followed their whole lives, the laws that they had been told would make them good. But then they turned back to him, and they pushed the child forward. "Go on and run," said the parents. Anyways, Lawrence took the child, and they began to drive off. And as they drove, they could see buses and buses coming in. And on the great TV up above, they could hear the names being drawn out, the names being decided of who would live and die. And as they drove, the boy looked out the window, and seemed to be thinking to himself. And they drove out of that city, to God knows where. Well, they drove on for miles and miles. And as they sat there, Lawrence said, "You were speaking about those ideas you had. What are they like?" The boy said, "I don't know. They feel so beautiful. I think up these places, far off. I get lost in them. They take me away." And Lawrence, he looked at the boy. "You know, it's not going to go well for us. There's nowhere for us to go. We can disguise ourselves all we want, and we can take ourselves away as far as we can, but where is there to hide?" And Elliot, he sat there and thought, I know. They say there's a place off in the forest somewhere. A place where people aren't like this. A place maybe we could be safe. It doesn't really have a name, and most of the people that I talk to don't even believe that it exists. But I have always thought that maybe somewhere out there was like that." Anyways, Lawrence again looked at the child and nodded his head. He didn't have the heart to tell him, but he wanted to tell him quite a lot of things. He wanted to tell him everything would be all right. He wanted to tell him that they were going to find a place to live, a happier place. But in truth, he knew that wasn't the case. He knew that everything might not turn out well. But as they drove down the road, they could hear the cop cars coming. And this is the part of the story where I could wish to tell you that everything turned out fine. Lawrence and Elliot went off on some great adventure and began to know quite a lot about each other, but the truth is they didn't really ever get to know too much about each other, at least not to this point. And I also have to say that they were caught. They were surrounded. This is reality. It is no fairy tale. There's no great escape in the end. And as they were taken to the prisons with all the other children. And they were taken down, and they saw the people there, some of them quite intelligent, but not intelligent enough, not reaching the grade point average, or not being physically fit enough. And finally, as they were sitting there, they were all called for, and they got up, and they went towards the auditorium. And Stephen Coleridge was sitting there, and he looked out at the great audience, and he said to them, "Today we do what is necessary. It is not just, it is not good. But goodness and justice is not always enough in this world. Goodness and justice is not what makes the world go round. Sometimes we look up into the stars and we ask ourselves, why? Why has society done this to us? I do not know. I do not pretend to know. These people here, they must die. It is fate. But we will keep going. I have the strongest belief that our society will be the best of societies, that we will find ways to overcome all of this, to make a greater world. Next term is coming for me, and I hope you all realize that the next man that comes in will have to do the same in the next man. We all must make our sacrifices. I have made mine. You all must make your choice." As Stephen Coleridge was standing there, he began to speak about the process that was going to be made, and that they would all die peacefully. No one would feel any pain. But as he was sitting there giving his speech, which would last up to about 2 hours, in the middle of it, there came a call. And Stephen, he looked over at the man that had received the call, and the man, he went up and he whispered to Stephen, and he seemed quite excited. Stephen listened for a moment, and he finally nodded his head and said, "Thank you." And then he turned back to the audience. "A miracle has happened. An absolute God-given miracle. We have been able to create plants and everything on Mars. We have water, we have resources, we have space. Not much, but for the moment, the process is going to be stopped. These people here will be allowed to live. It is nothing short of a miracle." And everyone began to applaud and cheer, and Stephen himself had a tear in his eyes. And Lawrence was removed from his shackles, as was Elliot, who began to jump up and down and say that a new life was about to begin for them, that there was hope, a very small hope, even I will admit, but a hope nonetheless. And as Lawrence walked up to Stephen, Stephen said, "I'm sorry, my friend. I hope you can forgive me." And Lawrence said, "Well, I suppose it's just the world. It's just the way the world was. But oh, what a great world it could have been. What a great world it could have been."